Welcome. As we begin this module, we're going to revisit key performance indicators for specific roles on a team. KPIs become an important part of the diagnostic toolset that we use through coaching algebra and are essential items for a coaching agenda. In this video, you'll learn how to set key performance indicators for positions within an organization to effectively track performance. Welcome back. In this video, we're going to revisit key performance indicators and how to best determine what the key performance indicators should be for specific roles on a team. And we're also going to discuss how to set KPI, key performance indicators, and how that helps us with our coaching practice. I know I've talked about key performance indicators a lot. Can you tell I think they're really important? You cannot coach people if you can't measure their performance. It just gets to be really hard. It just gets to be really subjective, and it can't be as effective as we would want it to be. And I know that there are some of you who don't work in environments where KPI are designed or created on your behalf. I also know that there are some organizations that tracking and capturing data and reporting on performance is more complicated than in others. So I'm very sensitive to that. I do understand it. But I do think that every position can have a few key performance indicators that you look at. Some are just easier to design than others, okay? So the first thing when we're thinking about KPIs, we have to look at what does somebody do? What does a position do every day? And how does that position contribute to the success of the organization? And what are those key elements, those key performance indicators that we use to determine the viability and the health of the position? And then those become things that we track. So it could be as simple as how many calls are completed, how many audits are completed, how many errors are made in their work. And then it might get more complex. How well are they contributing through their thought leadership on projects? And then we can benchmark the projects that they work on. Every position, I think, is designed to solve a particular problem. Are they solving that problem, and how do we know they are? Is it through customer response, internal client response? Sometimes you have to get pretty creative, but designing this is essential. Then what we want to do is make sure that we've calibrated what we identify as key performance indicators with the people in the role so that it makes sense to them and they understand that regardless of who's in the role, these are the key performance indicators we're going to be looking at, okay? And there has to be, as possible, transparent method to evaluating these key performance indicators so that not only do you have access to how well an employee is doing measured against these KPIs, but the employee knows how well they're doing measured against these KPIs. Okay, so when we meet to do coaching, these KPIs become part of that diagnostic tool that we use through coaching algebra. These become evaluative measures that we can rub our results up against to see what kind of performance are we getting. If the key performance indicator is this many phone calls or this many projects completed, and the employee has delivered this many, how well does that compare? How well is the position thriving and ultimately the person within it? I hope you can see that when you have this clearly outlined, it really, really helps me in knowing how best to help my employee, right? I can determine their success, I can determine their challenges, I can diagnose better when I have something to measure their performance up against, outside of just individual goals, which we're going to talk about in a moment. As we get into our discussion that relates to an agenda, key performance indicators are an essential piece of the agenda. They're an essential part of what we look at on a regular basis. Most KPIs can be determined in a 30-day cycle. Not all, but most. And so we want to know that I can measure someone's KPI at least every 30 days. One of the things that I hear very consistently from people is we get to the end of the year and we start doing performance reviews and we've got nothing. We've got no performance data, nothing to help us as managers really do a performance review. Now, there's a lot of philosophies on whether or not the way that we currently do performance reviews once a year, if that's even effective. But for now, it's how most organizations do performance reviews. When you've identified key performance indicators and you set up a practice of evaluating those at least once a month, think about how easy that makes your life. You get to the end of the year, 12 months. You've got 12 months of performance data. How much easier would a performance review be if you had that, right? So, in summary, we want to remember that key performance indicators are really essential anchors for our consistency of practice. If all the roles in our organization have clearly identified KPI, and then we put those on our agenda, our coaching agenda, we're looking at them all the time, there's no surprises. And secondly, it's the coaching agenda, right? So these key anchors, consistency of practice, and our coaching agenda. I want to really encourage you to be consistent with those key elements that you talk about with your employees every time you meet. KPI being one of them, but also using that overall agenda. We have to make sure that we have consistency of practice for everybody that we work with as it relates to our coaching.